Hello, everyone. It's Stephen Whiteside here from the uptrend.com with this weekend's edition of Protect Your Portfolio. Well, week 21 is come and gone. Last weekend was a holiday shortened week for the Canadian market. This week, it's going to be a holiday shortened week for the U.S. market as the U.S. markets are closed tomorrow. We're going to not do a video tomorrow morning, but we'll do one on Tuesday morning, and we will update the Canadian charts on Monday night. Now, there's a couple of major themes that are still continuing, and the first one is that bond prices are falling, and we actually took out the low from earlier in 2025. And of course, if bond prices are falling, that's putting upward pressure on bond yields, and you can see bond yields have started to spike through the highs from earlier at the start of 2025. So if bond yields are rising, of course, that puts pressure on the economy, especially the housing sector, as mortgage rates continue to move higher in 2025. At the same time, the US dollar index, which was up for a couple of weeks in a row, it completely reversed this week. And of course, we're nowhere near a weekly buy signal coming into this week. We were down just under 2% on the week. And of course, if the US dollar is falling, other currencies like the Canadian dollar are rising. And the Canadian dollar has done very well since Trump took office. So we expect the Canadian dollar to continue to rise going forward. Now, before we get to our weekly charts, let's start off by looking at some daily charts. And just a reminder that last week at this time, we did have a whole bunch of new weekly buy signals in the US market. And I recommended at that time that you don't take a full position. In fact, I said I was going to take a 25% position and then add to it if the market continued to move higher. So I hope you took that advice because so far we're not seeing any continued momentum to the upside. In fact, we're starting to see momentum to the downside. Now, on Friday, we saw the VIX for the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ generate daily buy signals. Of course, that's negative for stocks. And that's joining the VIX for the Russell 2000, which is on its third day of a buy signal. So things are starting to turn down for the U.S. market. On Friday, we did end the week on some daily sell signals, of course, which are not the same as weekly sell signals. It's going to take some time to generate those, but I was hoping that the market would continue to move higher and head up towards those highs from earlier this year, but that's not what happened. And so there's the Dow Diamonds back on a sell signal. There's the equal weighted NASDAQ 100 back on a sell signal. There's the S&P 500. We've got the technology sector and semiconductors both back on daily sell signals as of Friday's close. In the Canadian market, we also have the Canadian technology sector back on a daily sell signal as of Friday's close. In the Canadian market, we also have the World Index ETF back on a daily sell signal as of Friday's close. We also had Shopify end the day on a daily sell signal on Friday. So just to show you some of the weakness we ended with on Friday. Now, we've got NVIDIA's earnings coming out this week, and NVIDIA is still on a buy signal right now. That would change on Tuesday with a close below $128.02. Next up, let's take a look at those weekly charts. And starting off in the Canadian market, there's the iShares for the TSX 60, making a new high, but then pulling back. We did not close below the previous week's low. That's the first thing that I look for. And it was a bearish reversal week. We did close lower on the week, but again, did not close below the previous week's low. 39.06 is our big line in the sand. And where did we close? We closed at 39.06. So 40.63 is still in play. We're still on a weekly buy signal here. There's the Vanguard Canada ETF. It closed down just a tick over 0.5% and certainly got nowhere near the previous week's low. There we are at 53.13. We closed at 53.09. And of course, our next mathematical target to the upside is 56.25. There's a new closing high for the small cap ETF. We're trying to break through 2188. If we can do that, then 2266 comes into play. New high for the Venture Exchange, closing up just over 2% on the week. There's a new high for the bank ETF. We're trying to get through 43.75, got as high as 43.69. So if we can break out about 43.75, then 45.31 is our next target to the upside. We saw financials come back slightly on the week, did not close below the previous week's low. We're still stuck at 62.50. The high of the week was 62.88. So 65.63 could be our next target to the upside. No joy for the energy sector, small pullback on the week there. The price of crude oil was down slightly on the week, just down 44 cents on the week. Natural gas was up slightly on the week, so no major change for natural gas. Then looking at the gold sector, it was up over 6%, 6.76% on the week. So we're still on a weekly buy signal here. Gold was up $178.90 on the week. So no change in trend for the price of gold. Then looking at the IT sector, we were down 4.39% on the week, still closing above the upper channel line. So no change there. Let's finish off today's presentation taking a look at the U.S. market, and the VIX was up nearly 30% on the week. It's still down towards the lower channel line, so we still have some work to do to get up over 30.55, which would be our line in the sand for this coming Friday. Now, we did have the Dow Diamonds come down and close below the previous week's low, so that's a bearish sign. The S&P 500 did not do that, was down over 2.5% on the week. The NASDAQ 100 was down 2.35% on the week, holding up fairly well. Now, compare that to the Russell 2000, breaking down, closing below the previous week's low, down 3.47%. The small caps were down 3.82%. Micro caps didn't get hurt as much. They were down 2.19% on the week. Now, bank stocks were really weak, down 2.51%, closing way below the previous week's low. That's also true for the financials, which were down just a tick under 3% on the week. The energy sector was down over 4%, so no chance of a buy signal this coming Friday, while gold stocks were up over 9% on the week. And of course, we saw the price of gold up sharply on the week. Now, semiconductors, and we're looking at the SMH at the moment, they're having trouble breaking through 250. So we've been stuck here for the last 2 weeks. And of course, we were down on the week, but did not take out the previous week's low. So we're going to be watching those semiconductors very closely this week. Okay, folks, that's all for today's presentation. U.S. markets are closed on Monday. Canadian markets are open on Monday, but they're going to be very thinly traded without any adult supervision from the U.S. market. There's not going to be a lot going on, but we will post Canadian charts on Monday night. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Next time you'll hear my voice is on Tuesday morning.